Salutations, Norrath. This is Gannor speaking to you from the Chroniclers of Norrath, and joining me today is the legendary Rezikai Nightblade and the always rather frightening Diii and How are y'all?
Hi.
Hello.
I'm hateful as always.
I'm laissez-faire, as always.
This being our first introduction here, I think we all should take a moment to introduce ourselves, get a little bit of background. Let's go ahead and start with the lovely Teardal across the table. Please don't kill me.
Where's the fun in that? I go by Diii. Some people know me as Obsidian. I have been playing this game for entirely too long. I started playing in 2000 with Everquest. I have played every Everquest game out there. And I've always loved the lore. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you very much for that. And now we go over to our resident bard historian and cute little human, Rezikai.
Hey, I'm a half-elf.
Oh, well, you need pointier ears.
Hello, folks. Rezikai, as he said, I've been playing EverQuest in multiple iterations since 2001, 2002. Dabbled a little EQ1, played a lot of EQOA, played a lot of Champions of Norrath, a lot of EverQuest 2 as I've started just after launch and been off and on ever since, 15 years later.
And sadly, Champions of Norrath no longer works on computers. Sigh.
Yeah, because it's too old. The technology's too old. And like the second one had online for consoles.
Thank you very much. And I, Gannor, got my start in 1999. As soon as they made the Ixar, though, I got myself my own account instead of playing on my Pop's account. Created Gannor and Doomsar and have been happily sticking to the lore since. It has always been a passion. In fact, that's what got me stuck in the game, is the little history blurb in the manual about what Ixars were. Before then, it was basically, oh wow, it's 3D Tolkien, or Dungeons and Dragons with some extra dimensions. But then I read what the Ixar were about, and it's like, you know what? I like this. You may also have seen my books around the Antonio Bale server, so feel free to read.
Oh yeah, we forgot to we're on an AV, didn't we?
That's right. That? Why not? Draw attention to the server.
True. Oh, and let's not forget the host in our venue here.
And we are currently coming to you from Wayfinders, courtesy Serrest, the Martial Mousey.
So if you don't know what Wayfinders is, we are all on Antonia Bale, which is a roleplay server, and there are roleplay venues, which are places that people have designed to be locations where characters might interact and have open roleplay. Wayfinders? It's a restaurant in Timorous Deep.
We got together today as a kind of like a off-the-cuff kind of test on the software where we're going to be presenting lore videos for your other EverQuest players and fans. They won't be restricted just to EverQuest 2. They're going to be a broad spectrum of the EverQuest lore. They'll be different slightly. Occasionally we'll do chats like this. Sometimes there'll be standalone videos from different venues and regarding different subjects. This week we're just doing the subject because there's an expansion for AQ2 coming out on Luclin. Blood of Luclin would be some Luclin information we're likely to talk about today.
Back in April of 2001, a great event occurred. All of Brad McQuaid's Tolkien books were mysteriously replaced with Jules Verne, and one day he decided upon reading them, we would be going to the moon! Welcome to EverQuest, Honeymooners Edition.
To infinity and beyond.
So, I didn't play Luclin in EQ1, so I'm not as well versed in it. But
it was the best and worst expansion ever.
Oh, really? Like I've always had a fascination with the Shissar because they're so ancient, part of the linchpin races of the old lore, and with the fascination of the half-blood
Akevans.
The
Akevans?
Yes.
Yeah, we never really find out exactly how the Akivan are made, the Akiva, other than they are the children of Luclin. They are Luclin's creation. Some of the other races you'll find out, like Earl talks about using his clay to make races, and you'll hear about that. But the Akiva, it doesn't quite say. We know that they're immortal, and we know that their first form can die and turns into a shape form that stays alive.
Well, from what we understand, after Luclin distanced herself from the other gods shortly after her creation, that's its whole own story there. She was previously two separate gods that had been locked in a war and eventually realized they were going to wipe each other out. So in a last-ditch attempt to conserve themselves, they merged into a single being. The other gods looked at this and said, "What the?" The other god looked at that and said, "What the?" So she ran off, decided to take the moon for herself, and from the way it was described, she put some of her blood into the soil of Luclin, and from that the Akivans arose. Now that is apocryphal, that is possibly metaphorical, but we do know that the blood contains a great deal of the Akivans' power. It has a thick, tar-like morassness. When spilled, it can animate temporarily, and with the proper application of their own shadow magic, the blood can become a living, monstrous creature of its own under their command, what they call a Kas-Thox. So there is some merit to the theory that they are hers by the shedding of her own blood.
We should also note that when we're talking about Norrath, which is where most races live in the Everquest world, it has its own solar system, and it's got the solar system which has two moons. So there's Luclin and Drenal. The moon that most mortals see is Drenal, and Luclin was the one that was not visible to most mortals.
Don't forget Morel.
Do we can count, but that's more of a myth, isn't it? At the
No, it's even on the orreries. There are 3 moons. Morel is just so far away that you can only see it with the naked eye if you're in the overrealm or the plane of sky.
All right, we'll count that one for it.
There are also 4 planets in the solar system as well.
Just a hint for everyone that's viewing, the Wayfinders closed, so we decided to take up the rest of the conversation in Gannor's illustrious Shissar Manor.
Welcome to Apsis Island, purchased from the Dame of Freeport for a hefty sum. And here I have gathered my Shissarian relics, my memories of the past, and whatever little trinkets just happened to catch my snaky wine. That's right, that Ixar you see before you is one of the ancients. I am Gannor of Chelsith, Battle Master of Vizdra. Well, ex-Battle Master. Vizdra kind of things didn't go well for her, poor girl.
Yeah, world domination always has its flaws.
Well, rebelling against world domination tends to not work out too well either.
Well, she just wanted her own world domination, in her view.
Yeah, but things tend to not go well when you're trying to piss off the old Serrest. He seems to be able to pwn people by proc. He dropped the mic on Curafirm before Curafirm was even hatched.
Yeah. Speaking of, you know what? This kind of relates and ties the Shissar in. Luclin, prior to them going to Luclin, actually. I remember a game we talked once about the Combined Spires, and we talked about the Combined Spires and the Beta Spires.
The Spires were, to our knowledge, originally a Shissar creation. The Shissar came onto Norrath sometime in the Age of Scale or the Eldar Age. We don't know exactly when, but they were a prominent empire at the same time as the other oldest empires that followed the dragons. The Kromzek, the Eldar Elves. the giant, the dwarves. That's what I'm thinking of, and the Kedge. Those, plus the Shissar and the dragons, made up the first collection of major world-class empires. Now, Chelsith itself, the capital, the rise of Serrest, the corruption of the Shissar, so all of that was actually quite a bit later. That was about 600 before Green. But up to that point, the Shissar were well known across the world and well feared. They were still greedy, hedonistic, monstrous, sneaky, vicious, everything you'd like to think about of an evil race. They were sort of the original example.
You might want to clarify what before Green and why they use that as a time scale.
There are 3 primary timescales that are used to measure Norrathian history. The Antonian timescale is the one that you see in-game. The before and after Green is the Chroniclers of Ixar timescale, and it tends to be more consistently dated. So myself being Chroniclean and trying to use timelines, I find it a little more reliable. And then there's the AN timescale, Advent of Norrath, Advent of Nameless. That one's a little more difficult to follow, but it has been canonized by Holly Lonsdale, Holly Windstalker, Valar, Dev. So it is the official Dev timeline measurement.
Yeah, it's also, I believe they're in game if you want to look at different, a single tome with multiple dates on, I think in all 3 of the formats, is the Tome of Valen in the, might not be Tome of Valen, it's her Book of Shissar in the last part of Nectalis Tropos Castle 3. It asks these riddles and it tells you a bit of history, I think, from each part of collected timeline information. I think. Might be wrong with that.
And the Shissar use before Green and after Green because they're referring to the Green Mist, which basically wiped their existence off of Norrath, and they escaped. Depending on your timeline, they escaped both to the moon, and then in EverQuest 1, they actually took refuge under the sea with some of the remnants of the Combine Empire, which took some refuge under the sea as well.
Well, that's not exactly refuge. The Combine had actually collected ancient races, and we don't really know how they did it since they're not contemporaries of these races, but pinned them up in a zoo.
Yeah, how would they capture Shissar if the Shissar had been wiped out by the Green thousands of years before? I mean, let's say Shissar survivors that survived the Green Mist. How would the Combine find them and pin them up? Would there be a zoo for them, underwater, or that'd be weird.
But yes, the Green Mist was the occasion where the Shissar had finally pushed the gods so far that they decided to Control-Alt-Delete the whole race. Now, prior to that point, as was mentioned, the Shissar were very, very intelligent, despite being the big nasty brutes that they are. They were one of the top races for magical exploration. Back then, every race had sort of its own specialty. The Eldar elves were amazing geomancers and druids. They controlled the forces of nature with a talent that has not really been replicated to this day. The Kedge, we know, were very powerful evokers, very powerful alterationists, magicians, wizards. They could transform things, destroy things, awaken things. The Shissar were more in the area of manipulation. They were able to create the first portal spells that we have historical record of, and they built the Spire network to allow their agents and spies to keep track on the other races in silence. The center of the network is what they had called the Alpha Spires. You would know those in EverQuest 1 as the Dreadlands Spires, and those of you with EverQuest 2 would actually recognize them as Terran's Grasp. This was the center of the Shissar Spire network, and when the Green Mist was unleashed upon Norrath, this is the point at which they stepped off of Norrath. The only spires large enough to transport the entire Imperial Court at once.
Now, some of you in the layman might think, why are they called combined spires if they're the Shissar spires? In the history, the Combined Empire went back behind and dressed them up with the more stonework and ornate dressing around them to give them that look.
History is written by the victors.
Well, not just that. Actually, a lot of the Combine area was lost. In fact, that's in part called the Lost Age because so many of their records were destroyed after they made their exodus. But we do know that the Combine, because of their uniquely metropolitan nature, the way they collected other races, other ideas, it made them the most flexible empire up to their time. They were huge because they had so many different facets and so many free thinkers. That's what allowed them to eventually crack the secret of using the Shissar spires. And by co-opting these spires, they were able to expand their borders further, sort of like Romans discovering roads from somebody else. The spires became their central road network and the lifeblood of their empire. So naturally, they laid claim to them. These are our spires. These are the Combine spires. They even built villages around many of them.
Let's just for those that don't know, from EQ1, there was the big one in Terran's Grass. Well, Dreadlands spires, Terran's Grass in EQ2.
The Alpha spires.
Yep. There was EQ1 had the Corona spires, which are lost in EQ2. I guess they might be underwater. Yes.
Quite likely.
The Otis spires are still there. The Otis is not where it used to be anymore in the Q2.
And the modern erudites had to get creative to keep those working.
Yep. And then I believe the Velio spires are still there. Yeah, they're in the
Eastern Wastes.
Eastern Wastes, yep. Right there.
Greater Fadark spires.
Oh, and Fadark, yes.
Plus, there were spires in Noctulus Forest in EQ1 that did not work, that work now in EQ2.
Now, are those the Warpfont spires or the regular Quelthulian spires?
Yes, there were actually Combine spires in Noctulus in EQ1. I don't believe those exist physically anymore. They've been buried or destroyed, but they were able to build an Alterran spire in roughly the same location, just north of the river.
That's interesting. In EQOA, we had all the spires that you guys had. We had the Karanas, the Otis, but we didn't have the other continents because we only have two continents in that game. Because they didn't fare too well. But we had more of the, in Darklight Wood, the small little spire that sits on top of that little pyramid, just as you zone in from Nectalos itself. There's like some Luclin, there's some Lucan militia there in Freeport. Those little warp font spires. We had those in our Nectalos and actually in a lot of our swamplands areas too. Wizards.
You mean the pyramids?
Yeah, a little pyramid with a little spire thing on top. Yeah, that's it.
Those are, for as far as I can tell, true Combine constructions that were intended to expand the network. There are a few more of those, including in Nectalos, including South Corona, and quite a few of them in places that the humans had been more built up in.
Yep, we had those too. No,
and those are still there in Darklight Woods, which used to be northern Nectalos.
Yep. Now, those were in EQ1 as well?
Yep. They were also in Northern Row.
Yep, that's right. Yep.
And some worked and some didn't. There was the South Row spires too that you could only reach by evacuating, basically. But you teleported to the plains from there too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our wizards and stuff did that too, yep.
So I guess in a sense you could think of it as sort of three waves. You have the original Shissar Spire network, you have the Combine expanded network, and then you have the Alterran reconstructed network. And each time they cover a little more ground, get a little bit of a smaller, more efficient shape.
I don't know if in EQA if they understood exactly what the spires were yet, because it had been fleshed out. But there was another set of spires, big combined spires, way north of our continent, of Old Antonica. Now, it's in an area of the game that it was a zone that was not put in EQ1, but we got it. It's on the map though, in EQ1's map. You know, there's 3 lakes in northern Antonica that aren't ever there in EQ1. Well, I guess the Nest is still there. The Nest, Winter's Deep, and Lake Nicholas. Well,
Lake Nereus.
yeah, Lake Nereus. That's it, Lake Nereus.
They actually did end up adding one of them, I believe, in Everquest 1 after they added the Serpent's Spine expansion.
Was it the Nest? That would make some more sense, because I think it's where the Nest would have been closest to them.
No, I think the Nest might have been part of the
It's real close to Hollis.
the Dragons of Norrath, but I don't think you actually get to see the Nest Lake in that. But I've never seriously explored the Dragons of Norrath area. It's very locked in. You have to fight your way through it. It's quite a pain.
Gotcha. Well, ours was Winter's Deep. We did have Winter's Deep there, and if you swam all the way out past the way north of Winter's Deep, of the far northern banks of the lake, where parts of Everfrost and Seleucid Eye kind of like came together just to form that other like boundary. There was another combined spire there, big one, but it was only half built. Like,
that's okay. It may interest you to know there was another completed large Shissar spire at the bottom of the timorous deep ocean. Everquest 1 players might remember this as the legendary Firepot Room.
Oh.
My theory is that used to be a connection for the Shissar to keep an eye on or deal with the Kedge kingdom, the Kedge people.
That would make sense.
The fire pot room is incredibly interesting too, because if you had the keys to everything, which you didn't unless you were a guide, you could get to just about everywhere. Remember when I told you that there is a fire pot in Mariak, Third Gate? That fire pot, if you click it from Mariak, leads you to Lesser Fadark Forest. But you could click a fire pot in the fire pot room, and it would teleport you to Mariak.
I don't remember it being keyed from the Firepot Room, but then again, I did actually spend some time as a guide, so I don't know if that affected my account. I used to keep a copy of the CS Home Zone files as a trophy, but sadly that computer was destroyed, and I really miss having that.
Is that fire pot? You're talking about the one? Is it the one fire pot that like just lead on that path that leads just into a wall, and there's just a fire pot sitting there?
There's just one fire pot sitting in the middle, and it's a dead end hall. And if you click that, you have to have the key, and it leads you to the Lesser Fadark Forest, which is where the Teardal camp is, in the Lesser Fadark Forest.
I need to go back and see, because I don't know if aesthetically it's still there anymore, because they added the fourth gate finally, a couple years ago, to EQ1. And so, I don't know.
And now we know the secrets of the Blueberry Invasion.
Well, anyway, we're getting off topic. The combined. I didn't know about the one under. We didn't get to more Steve in our game, and I didn't know about it. Are they still here now in EQ2? Spires.
No, we do not have access to that part of the Timorous Deep. That's actually quite a bit further north of the area that we have available in game.
I'd like to. I wish we could take screenshots and EQ away, because I'd like to have seen what you see what the half finished redressing spires look like. That's what basically I'm trying to explain to that. It kind of reminds me of Salaxia's Stronghold. the building does.
Well, I can't help but imagine there's a similar architecture in there, if
That's
not similar builders.
That's the entrance to Fourth Gate.
Oh,
That's
yeah?
that building that I... So what you see, like I've talked about before, is... and you really see this distinct attempt to tie EverQuest and EverQuest 2 back together. And you see a lot of sharing of resources, and you see a lot of sharing of timelines and information. And that's when things get simultaneously both more interesting and a little bit more frustrating, like you were talking about with the time stone and what Lannis was doing and things like that. Even if you're looking at the picture of Fourth Gate, you will notice that the architecture for Fourth Gate is straight out of EverQuest 2. It comes directly from EverQuest 2.
The double columns with the big, like, Triforce thing in the middle? Or
The blue marble, basically. So if you...
Well, look at the picture of Prince Terrence Bex that I just posted. That looks like he's inside an EverQuest 2 Neriac house, doesn't it?
And I'm heading back into Fourth Gate, and I'll show you the light posts are the light posts from Neriac and EverQuest 2.
Huh. Well,
Actually, hey Rezikai, check this out. This is straight from Alakazam. This is a picture from the Neriac Fourth Gate Darklight Palace, straight out of EQ2.
oh, look at that! It looks almost exactly like ours. Look at that. Though theirs looks way more dark and sinister. Why can't we get
Oh yeah, Fourth Gate is incredibly dark compared to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
It's also a raid zone.
No, it's Neriac. It's home. I don't know what you're talking about.
It's also a raid zone.
No, you're full of it. This is home. We do not raid home. You cannot perfect perfection.
It's always good to have a good Dark Elf sister. Stand
No,
over.
but as a Shiso, I can certainly eat it.
Alright, so D, I need you to start the diatribe you had on why the dragon was the reason for the explosions and put it back together. And the God Slayer that you had earlier.
Gannor said that a dragon did it, and that's basically the truth for how Luclin got put back together. So the mortals of Norrath tend to make really stupid decisions a lot, and they get really excited about things and leap first without thinking things through. We did it again with Karathim. If you are not familiar with Karathim, he is the Sleeper, the world-ending dragon that is a chromatic dragon from...
Prismatic.
Excuse me. But prismatic dragon, made from two different types of dragons. Basically what Nagy and Vox wanted to do again. And he... we teach him how, and we do a test run for him when we are taking our mythical weapons and pulling the spells out of the mythical weapons so that we can use the spells. We teach him how to do that, and then he does that with Rowan Thier's swords, Enox and Atok, and he pulls those off, and we're like, oh shit, it's that time again where we have unleashed a cataclysm on the world. How are we going to solve this? And we solve this by trapping him in the moon and putting the moon of Luclin back together. And so Luclin is reconstructed, and you can see it in the sky, and everybody's all happy and excited. And now we're going to go back to the moon again, to infinity and beyond.
To add a little to that, Al-Kabor, and the duality in general, I mean, I still call him, always known him, but Al-Kabor found an ancient Shisarian tablet, the Chelsith Stone, which is a calendar that predicts events for up to a span of about 2,000 to 3,000 years. And on there, he was able to decipher the reforming of Luclin as part of the Ages End prophecy. Now, he was able to get a Draconic Chronomage, I believe the last surviving Draconic Chronomage, Jorlak, to do this after looking at the tablet mid-battle and realizing that's what it meant. Now, as with all things, mortals jumping in where they shouldn't, he realized shortly after this that he just fulfilled exactly what the Shissar were promising, and anything the Shissar promise is probably not good for Norrath. So he is very eager to get all of us up there and finding out if those Shissar were really planning to off-cure a firm like this just so they could come in his place and wreck shit.
And the Shissar calendar has been around forever. The Doomsday calendar, it is very familiar. You will see it all over EverQuest 1. Everybody knew it. Everybody was wondering what the symbols were. And it was only in EverQuest 2 that we actually got the information. And I don't know. Gannor, do you have a copy of it in this house?
I do not have a copy of it. Doomsar has one in his library, though.
Where we got pieces of it revealed. Although we still don't know the fullness of the Evil Bunny of Doom.
Of who?
The Evil Bunny of Doom. The Evil Bunny of Doom that is at the gates of Neriak, that repeats itself all around Neriak, that is part of the Doomsday calendar.
The central sigil looks a bit like a face with two large ears, and some have theorized that symbolizes Vishan. Others have other theories, but since we don't know for sure, we call it the Bunny of Doom.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I often had people mistake it for the image of Everquest, because this is kind of similar. The lower, small mouth and eyes, and the large ear size coming out.
It looks like a bunny, and we call it the Evil Bunny of Doom around here, because why not?
Yeah. Well, I just want to put a footnote in there on the Shissar calendar and the runes from Miki 1 and Miki 2, that if you are one of the few owners of the 10-year anniversary book from Miki 1, which I used to own before I sold it, for quite a bit of money, it used to go for well over $200 on eBay. You see the original plan for a lot of the original home cities for EQ2 before they had to change them during the beta and build a new game. And during some of those early sketches, you see that the Shissar calendar was actually supposed to be 4 different pieces put together, and we were working with one of the main pieces, but over time, mechanics change, stories change, things like that had to be changed before the launch. So you just got the one main piece, but it actually does show the original base and holding rock, where the 4 rocks go together, and the empty rock is the one that the Shissar's calendar that we know it as would fit into it. Very fascinating things. Yep.
I will try to take some pictures of those and upload them for you, because I have the anniversary book.
Oh, you're lucky. I wish I wouldn't have sold mine off, but I was creating the game 4 years ago. I'm never coming back to this game. And look what happened. So,
I actually have a theory on that, and I don't think that picture has been entirely discounted. I know the one you're referring to. The Shiss that we have in EverQuest 2 specifically appears to cover a range of approximately the early Chelsith era up to today. Now that's only about 2,500 to 3,000 years. We know the Shissar existed before that. We know the history of Norrath goes back almost that long again over, if you count the advent of the Nameless as the, air quote, start of Norrath. Now that would actually fill 2 slots of that. So if you're looking at this as Serrest or the Shissar in general seeing the timeline of Norrath, then one could propose that the 4 stones represent 4 phases of Norrath's history, and right now we would be in the dead center of it. Meaning, theoretically, somewhere 6,000 or so years from the event beyond which the relevancy of Norrath as a living place is no longer a thing. Just a theory, though. That's pure speculation. But it sort of makes an odd kind of sense, doesn't it?
it does. Because I think on the image, it's either the 3rd slot, or I think it's the 3rd slot that has showing where our Shissar calendar for our games would lock into it. So that would kind of make sense. We'd be remiss if we didn't try to mention the Combined Empire and the rebels that went to Luclin, chasing the other.
The Seru Inquisition. Nobody expects the Seru Inquisition.
I'm not a huge EQ and lore Luclin guy, so I don't know the deep lore behind it. I know there was a...
So, here's what happened. You had the Combine Empire on Norrath, and basically you had a schism that happened where a faction tried to kill Staff Kata.
You could actually take it a little further back. The Combine Empire was actually doing very well up to this point, and a Tyr Dal had actually petitioned to join the Combine Empire. And Taspir Kata, Emperor of the time, was actually able to measure this person, got used to them, liked them. They actually considered them a worthy addition. They were Tyr Dal, but they had demeanor about them. They actually did things that were good. They were accepted into the Combine Empire and even took a lady wife. And this person is actually still in Catacastellum as of EQ1. I don't remember his name, but he's in the large cathedral building, one of the side rooms. The inclusion of an evil race set off the highest ranking clerical faction of the Empire, though. Lord Seru and his followers are the ones who then decided to assassinate Taspir Kata because of the risk of him tampering or polluting the Combine Empire's holy aim. Seru is a devout Nathaniel Mar worshipper, but like so often you get people who are totally zealous in Nathaniel Mar worship, they become completely isolated from everyone else. So after attempting to assassinate the Emperor of the Combine, he chased down and sought to eliminate everyone that supported loyally Taspir Kata. He was willing to erase the entire empire from Norrath to chase down those who would pollute the Combine Empire.
And so eventually...
Go ahead. So they teleport to the moon to try to escape, and Seru follows him. And basically what you have is you have two factions that build themselves up, well, three factions really. You have the people of Shadowhaven who are like, we're just done with this bullshit, let's leave it alone. And then you have the Kata loyalists who exist in Catacastellum, and they're led by Staff Kata's wife, Lycia, I guess is how you would say her name. And then you have Sanctus Seru, which is led by, the evil Roman popal people of sterility. Basically, it's a very rigid society, very bright white lights, white marble, gold, and it's very heavily drawn from real world history in that you can see the schism of the Roman Empire with the rise of Christianity and things like that.
It's a fascinating philosophical comparison. If someone would take the time to do it, it might be a project for later for one of us. Now, I'd like to go over the environment of Luclin for those of us that haven't been there, because I've always heard of something called the Grey, and Luclin, if I remember, was a large expansion landmass-wise. I was always under the impression, rather.
Yes, it's huge. You have a bunch of overland zones. This predated instancing, so you didn't have instance zones. So you had a lot of overland zones, then you had indoor zones. It's gotten even bigger now in Everquest 1. The Plane of Shadow is actually located off of it now. And there's it's huge, and it's one of the prettiest expansions in my perspective that they ever did. It's got some of the most gorgeous landscapes that you will see, and you have underground areas, you have the land areas, you have the cities and things like that. So it covers a huge area. The Grey itself was actually, I guess you could say, terraformed by the Shissar when they were attempting to basically create a vacuum so that the green mist couldn't get to them.
If one remembers, the launch of Luclin was the first attempt by the developers to create a new graphical dynamic for Everquest and to update models, meshwork, and other tools that support the game. They created an overhauled version of all of the racial types, a new engine to generate the land. So it does show an incredible change in definition from all of the zones prior to it. Now, some of the art direction I question. I was never happy with the Luclin Ixon. The gnomes looked just freakish. But they did put a lot of effort into it. Luclin was really their attempt to break the mold in full and create a new identity for EverQuest. They took a lot of gambles, took a lot of risks, some of which left us breathless.
This would be where the rise of the quote-unquote Luclin models came from, I assume.
That is exactly it.
Ah.
And Twilight Sea is just beautiful. It is absolutely gorgeous. And like I said, on Norrath, historically, both in EverQuest and in EverQuest 2, with the exclusion of the Lumbra, we really are mostly above land. We don't do much other than the surface area. But in Luclin, they took advantage of the fact that there was, caverns underneath, and so you go to like the Acrylia caverns, you go to the Netherbian lair, you go above and below, and it's really interesting. And they actually explicitly talk about how the different races interact. So for instance, in EverQuest 1 lore, there are the thought horrors that exist underground, and they are actually fighting with the Shissar because the Shissar are building in their vacuum that they've created, and they're tunneling underground to expand their real estate, and they're kind of encroaching on the thought horrors area.
The Shissar mines, populated primarily with undead Ixar, directly into the central nests of the Thought Horrors. Now, Thought Horrors are somewhat intelligent, but like a lot of Luclin native species, they are just beneath that level of intelligence where you would get tool usage, where you would get organized society. They almost operate more like a hive around a central overfiend. And having gone back and visited the Deep just a couple days ago, the Shissar mines are one thin wall away from the Thought Horror Overfiend's central nest. I'm not sure I'd call it so much a war as the Thought Horrors just absolutely doing everything they can to keep from being dug out of existence. You wouldn't think you'd feel sad for a bunch of nightmare horrors that are half-existent and suck your thought body with tendrils from the back of their head. But they're actually getting themselves in a very tight position currently. It is not looking good for them.
They're not getting themselves into anything. It's the evil Shissar who are encroaching upon the poor Thought Horrors' native breeding grounds.
What measure is a non-cute?
And let's not forget our favorite four-armed friends from their locals up there.
But yes, basically the Grey is... So, the Green Mist, we kind of touched upon it, but the Shissar got too big for their britches, and Khazad-Thul decided that he was going to help the Ixar smack them down, and he released the Green Mist, which travels through the air. So, anywhere there's air, the Green Mist can get to them and is a threat, which is why they created the vacuum in the Grey, and why their Shissar existed there, and then also why they exist underwater in EverQuest 2 is because the city was banished beneath the waves by Praxis, so it's underneath the water, and so the corrupted air of the Green Mist cannot get to them. Now, why the Green Mist affects the Shissar and nobody else, that's its own thing.
Vanished beneath the waves? To what do you refer?
I mean the what you call it city, whatever the combined city.
Yes, the combined city.
Okay.
Catacastrum.
Okay, for a moment there, you had been mentioning EQ2, and I thought you had been Dross, so my apologies. I got mixed up.
Nope, just talking about crossing over EQ1 and EQ2, because like I said, once you get to a certain point, there's a lot of back and forth where you pick up a piece of a story here and you pick up a piece of a story there. And you see that in EQ Online Adventures as well. Significantly less in Champions of Norrath because of the design of the game that it was, and then of course there's the pen and the paper game as well. I don't include the novels in there really because the novels had so much. The novels were not written necessarily based on the Valen Bible, the lore Bible. One of the things that's unique about Everquest, and it's unique about the entire franchise, is that it has a central lore Bible, and it had a central lore person who was behind it. And even though Valen isn't there anymore, I really do think that Holly and co tend to still stick as much as they can with that central core lore that was established in the game, and they really don't divert from it. It may get crazy at times and seem odd to us, but it's still very centralized. Their lore has an internal cohesion that is lacking from games like World of Warcraft.
Well, and let's just bring this up for the normies that may not know. EverQuest kinda is based off an old Dungeons and Dragons campaign from Bill Trost and Valen, Tony Garcia, and
Brad
McQuaid. They all knew each other. I guess Bill and Tony knew each other since either high school or maybe earlier. And Bill's character was this guy called Mayong, which no one's ever heard of again. And Tony was Sir Luclin. So,
and Brad was Aradun.
Yeah, and I remember they said they played in the Greyhawk campaign for D&D, which is cool. But yeah, so it has cohesion. Now, Tony hasn't been there since 2007, 2008, so it's been over 10 years. But people like Candor, like Holly Windstalker / Valor, Cathiel, Elucidae, and some others. Jindrak's no longer there, but he was a good lore guy too. You've had some real good honorable mentions, like Alchick, who did good, and Miss Doomcookie, the dev who also is no longer there, but she took the old story that was going to be the Shadow Odyssey of the Ancient Nine Champions returning, and parlayed that and tweaked that into a grand tale of them renamed them the Ethernauts, which I found okay. I look forward to see something called the Red Desert, or the Scarlet Desert. Was that in EQ1? Luclin?
Yes, it was. There was a pre-Shisar Luclin civilization that was humanoid in form. We know nothing about them. They coexisted at the time when the Akivans ruled Luclin. The different civilizations, most of them very primitive in nature, were subservient and generally kept away from the Akivans. But this civilization, we called them the Sun Revenants. They're not actually undead, but that was the name that the Shisar ascribed to them. And after the Shisar had built the Grey on the edges of the Scarlet Desert, the Sun Revenants began to dwindle in number. There's still a few of them in EverQuest 1. As of EverQuest 2, they are officially extinct. They lived on a plateau they called the Shining Mesa, and that had been their central citadel. That is still there in the beta. The Shining Citadel, in some form, the plateau, still stands over the Scarlet Desert.
Huh. I had no idea.
And so one of the things about Luclin is that in EQ1 it existed, and the reason and the ways that it existed that it did is that it was half in the sun and half in darkness. So the Sun Revenants lived in the Scarlet Desert, which was always in the sun, perpetually in the sun. So a desert without any of the relief of nighttime. So they lived in this very, very harsh environment and had strong adaptations. And then they had some alliances or worked with some of the Tagi, which is another one of those considered to be lesser races. That was a sentient race that had all kinds of civilizations and tribes all across Luclin.
Or as I like to call them, the brain monkeys.
Oh, that's something else I forgot about. The little guys, what are they called? The
Gremlings?
Grimling. What were their roles in Luclin EQ1?
The Gremlings were another primitive, original Luclin native race that was molded and adjusted in some ways. We don't know the specifics. They don't keep my note that both the Akevans had an influence on them and the Shissar manipulated them in some degree. Gremlings are highly magical in nature. In traditional lore in Everquest 1, they are killable, but with great difficulty. With any natural weapon, you actually had to create special bane weapons to be able to effectively and efficiently kill them off. Luclin really liked its bane weaponry. Shissar's also required bane weapons, and Lord Inquisitor Seru had his own protections that required bane weapons. It was a pain.
Yeah, and that's another one of the reasons why I said that it was the best and the worst, is because the raiding in Luclin could be very frustrating. Let's not even get to Vexthal and the 30 to 40 minute single mob kills. But yeah, the Gremlings brings up another point that we really haven't touched on, which is the Vashir and the Kirans, basically, and how we got the Kirans versus the Vashir, and we have that race back in Everquest 2, and now they're the Kirans again. But they look much more like a hybrid of what the Vashir and the Kirans did in Everquest 1.
Well, they are, actually. Originally, the lands of Otis were owned by a single large, multicasted empire. This was the Empire of Kareth. The Vashir were the ruling caste, the large, big cats, the lions, your tigers, your pumas. They were the warriors and the leaders. The Karens were the religious caste, the priests, the prophets, the tenders. They sort of lived along the western edge of the continent. And you had the Kajekin, which were on the eastern edge. They were the farmers, the fishers, the minders, the makers. The Erudian Civil War culminated in a massive explosion. The erudites tried to wipe out the heretics with one gigantic boom. But because the heretics had built their lair under the mountain of Kareth, the entire capital city of this feline empire was blown all the way to the moon. The Vashir were trapped up there, and the Karens and Kajekins were left behind to create their own path. Now we know the Kajekins continued and then were wiped out by the Erudites. The last remains of their village are in Otis today, fully ghostified. There is nothing left of them. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm like, to load up an EQ1 and check that one out.
Yep, the Kajekins in EQ1 are in the Stonebrunt Mountains, and the Karens are in Kara on opposite sides of Toxulia. The Kajekin village in Everquest 2 is in the Stonebrunt Highlands. You'll have to go through some caves or fly around the edge, but it is in an alcove on the eastern side of the island. A big burnt-down city with ghosts of Kajekins still fighting ghosts of Erudites. Now, when the path to Luclin was recreated by Al-Kabor, Vashir began returning to Norrath in numbers. They began reconnecting with their old roots. They still considered the other feline races to be their subservience, their dependents, their kin. When Luclin was resealed, that handful of Vashir intermingled and eventually came to become a critical part and ruling force of the Chroniclers of Norrath. And through ample reproduction, modern Karens took on a lot of the genetic qualities of these remaining Vashir. They, because of that contribution, became larger, became stronger, became smarter. The modern Kara is, as Dee said, a hybrid of the original Vashir ruling caste and the Karens that were left behind into a new sort of unified culmination of the Vashir and the Karen. And this brings our discussion to a close. I thank you all for joining us again. I am, of course...
I'm Dee, the troublemaker.
And my name is Rezikai. Remember, you can always find us at chroniclers_of_Norrath at gmail.com. And we'll have links to our social media pages below.